Sex revenge.
I ended a man's life yesterday. Well, technically, anyway, with a PDF attachment and the ideal timing. In a few moments, I will tell you how it really started in December 1999, when I was just another invisible secretary who found a credit card receipt that changed everything. But right now, it's September 2025. I'm 80 years old and they still underestimate me. Different generation of idiots. Same mistakes. I'm at Mount Auburn Cemetery, visiting Tom's grave. He died in 2018. Heart attack at the Dedham Mall while checking receipts at Foot Locker. Same mall where we used to go to service merchandise to look at the jewelry displays behind the glass, writing down item numbers on those little golf pencils. I bring supermarket flowers, nothing fancy. He doesn't deserve the good ones from Whole Foods. The FBI seized Bradley's assets this morning, I tell the headstone. $47 million in crypto. Jennifer Kowalski's son was his partner. Small world, right? Kid inherited his mother's ethics. My iPhone 17 buzzes. Another LinkedIn message from some Harvard Business Review writer wanting to interview me about the Pemberton Purge of '99. 26 years later, they all want the story now that I'm harmless. A relic. Someone's grandmother who happened to take down a financial firm's entire executive team with nothing but a filing system and a good memory. Back when we kept everything on index cards and in Rolodexes. Not these cloud things. Robert's waiting in the Tesla. Still brings me flowers every week at 83. We're having dim sum in Chinatown, the place that still takes cash. I've got $50,000 in small bills hidden in my Cambridge condo, habit from the old days. You never know when the computers might crash. Y2K didn't get us, but something will. The young women still come to me. Different problems, same solutions. Document everything. Be patient. Strike when they think you're invisible. Let me take you back to the glorious 1990s now. I found the credit card statement in Tom's uniform pocket when I was doing laundry. December 3rd, 1999. A Friday. Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know was playing on Mix 104.1. How's that for irony? Before that, they'd been playing Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On for the millionth time since Titanic. I had a lean cuisine Swedish meatballs thawing on the counter. 290 calories, Weight Watchers. Points calculated and logged in my food diary. The new kind. Not like those old Stauffer's dinners from the 80s that tasted like cardboard, but we ate anyway. I was sorting whites from darks, like I'd done every Friday for 23 years, using Tide with bleach alternative because Tom was too cheap for separate bottles. Tom's mother's house dresses in one pile, the ones she'd ordered from the Sears catalog since 1975, because apparently her arthritis only flared up on laundry day. His BPD uniforms in another had to use just the right amount of starch, or he'd sulk like a toddler. The Y2K countdown clock on the microwave said 28 days left, and everyone was panicking about computers crashing. My neighbor was stockpiling Spam and bottled water like it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, all over again. But I was more worried about the $47.83 in our checking account that had to last until payday. Our GE microwave from 1987 was still working, back when they made things to last. Not like now. Same microwave where I'd heated up thousands of healthy choice dinners while Tom ate real food. 31 years at Pemberton Financial Services in Kendall Square, and what did I have to show for it? Carpal tunnel from typing on keyboards designed for men's hands. And before that, from the IBM Selectrics that sounded like machine guns in the typing pool, varicose veins from fetching coffee in heels, because sneakers aren't professional, Dorothy. Not even those easy spirit pumps that looked like sneakers, the ones from the commercial where the women played basketball in heels. A permanent dent in my shoulder from carrying everyone else's emotional baggage along with my fake leather purse from Marshall's. Used to be from Feline's basement before I couldn't even afford that. $31,000 a year, less than the parking spot costs that they gave Jason Whitman for free. Every morning watching the .com kids flood off the red line with their messenger bags and stock options, making more in signing bonuses than I'd made in a decade. These kids didn't remember Black Monday in '87 when the market crashed and we thought it was the end. They didn't live through the S&L crisis. But sure, I was part of the Pemberton family. The part that cleans up after Christmas dinner and doesn't get invited to the table. I'd been up since 4:30 a.m. that morning, watching the last 15 minutes of Nick at Night. They were showing I Love Lucy, reruns, the Chocolate Factory episode, again. Then packing Tom's lunch, bologna on white Wonder Bread, Fritos, a Coke classic. Not that new Coke garbage from '85 that nobody wanted. And a Little Debbie, even though his cholesterol was 287, ironing his stupid, casual Friday polo shirt that he thought made him look like Don Johnson from Miami Vice. Yeah, right. More like Dan Connor from Roseanne, laying out his blood pressure pills because God forbid a grown man remember his own medication. Then the commute from Somerville to Kendall Square on the Red Line, pressed against software engineers who hadn't discovered deodorant yet, probably never used Right Guard or Old Spice like normal people. Watching the 20-somethings with their Palm Pilots and IPO dreams while I clutched my coffee-stained canvas tote bag from the PBS pledge drive in '93. The bag was full of everyone else's problems. My boss's dry cleaning receipt from Raymond's Cleaners. Janet from HR's Prozac prescription. Everyone was on Prozac since that book came out. She was too embarrassed to pick up herself. The birthday card for Whitman's mistress that he had me buy at CVS used to be store 24 and sign Love, Jason in my handwriting because his looked like a third grader's. 31 years of this crap, and I was one more, Dorothy, be a dear, and away from taking the letter opener on my desk and going full postal, like that expression meant something after those incidents in the '80s. They'd probably make me clean up the blood myself with those brown paper towels that never absorbed anything. The credit card charge was for $1,847 at Tiffany's in Copley Place. Back when Copley used to have that Jordan Marsh where my mother bought all our school clothes. Tom hadn't bought me jewelry since our 10th anniversary in 1986, the year of Halley's Comet, which we missed because Tom was watching the Celtics in the Larry Bird glory days. But there was another charge that made my stomach drop. The Marriott Long Wharf, $300, November 15th. The night he said he was working security detail at the Celtics game. The new Fleet Center, not the old Boston Garden we all loved. Then another from Victoria's Secret, $230. My husband, Boston PD for 25 years, hadn't bought me lingerie since the Reagan administration. Morning in America, my ass. The last thing on the statement, dinner at Mistral, $425. That's when I knew. Tom earned $52,000 a year. Mistral was where the Beacon Hill crowd ate, where a glass of wine cost more than I spent on groceries for a week at Star Market, back when it was still Star, before Shaw's bought everything. My name's Dorothy Margaret Sullivan, Dot to everyone except my mother, God rest her soul. 54 years old in 1999, married to Tom Sullivan since 1976. Our wedding song was Silly Love Songs by Wings, if you can believe that. Back when he was a rookie cop with dreams and I was a secretary who could type 95 words per minute on an IBM Selectric 2, the good one with the correction tape. No kids. Tom said we couldn't afford them on civil service salaries, though somehow he could afford a Boston whaler boat we used twice a year and a timeshare in Dennis that smelled like mildew. I sat at my kitchen table in our triple-decker in Somerville. Not even Cambridge proper couldn't afford that, at the same Formica table we'd bought from Leekmere in 1978. Holding that credit card statement and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not sadness, not even anger, purpose. Like when I was 18 in 1963 and thought I could be like Mary Tyler Moore, conquering the world before the world showed me my place. See, I grew up in Charlestown when it was still rough, before the yuppies moved in with their Volvos and LL Bean catalogs. Daughter of a longshoreman and a seamstress who did piecework for the garment district. First in my family to finish high school, even took night classes at Bunker Hill Community College in accounting, using those TI calculators the size of bricks. But that's as far as a girl like me got in those days. Secretary was a good job, my mother said while watching her stories. All my children, and the young and the restless. Steady, respectable. Meet a nice man, get married, that's success? Like those women in the Virginia Slims ads. You've come a long way, baby, and but had we really? Tom came from Southie, third-generation cop, Irish Catholic like me. We met at a church dance in '74, dancing to Dancing Queen, even though Tom had no rhythm. Married 2 years later at St. Catherine's, I kept working because one income wasn't enough, even though Tom's mother never let me forget that her generation stayed home with their children. What children, I wanted to ask. The ones Tom said we couldn't afford while he bought season tickets to the Patriots and spent every Sunday screaming at the TV like they could hear him. Monday morning, I walked into Pemberton Financial Services at 7:45 a.m. Like always. The building still had that smell of cigarette smoke from when you could smoke everywhere, until like 1995. The security guard, Miguel, held the door for me. "Morning, Mrs. Sullivan. Early as always." "Has to be done, Miguel," I said. Same response I'd given for 15 years. My desk, steel tanker desk from the '60s that weighed a ton, sat outside the executive conference room, what they called mission control, because I managed calendars for 6 VPs, had my electric typewriter for carbon copies, my Rolodex with every contact from the last 3 decades, and my message pad with those pink while you were out slips. My computer was a Windows 95 that crashed daily, still better than the DOS system we had before where you had to remember all those commands. The executives all had new Windows 98 machines, of course. I made the coffee, regular Folgers and decaf Sanka, not this Starbucks nonsense that was taking over every corner. Stocked the conference room with legal pads, made sure the fax machine had thermal paper that always curled. Same routine since the Carter administration, just with different technology. I remember when we got our first fax machine in '84 and thought it was magic. At 8:30, Jason Whitman arrived. 29 years old, Harvard MBA, been with the company 2 years. Probably never used carbon paper or whiteout in his life. My newest boss, though I'd been there since before he was born, since Nixon was president, for God's sake. "Morning, Dorothy," he said, not looking up from his Palm Pilot, probably playing that snake game. "I need the Richardson files copied and bound before the 10 o'clock, and make sure the conference room has those Danish cookies from the good bakery, not the Stop and Shop ones." Of course, Mr. Whitman, I said. Always Mr. Whitman, while he called me Dorothy like I was his grandmother who still watched Murder, She Wrote reruns. At lunch, I did something I'd never done in 31 years. I went to the Cambridge Public Library and used their computer to search the internet. The World Wide Web, as Dan Rather still called it. Waited 20 minutes for Netscape Navigator to load. Typed in Tom Sullivan Boston Police on Alta Vista. Google was barely a thing yet. Found the Police Association website that looked like it was designed by a child. Then I searched Boston Police Salary Public Records. Then Marriott Long Wharf, November 15th. That's when I found her, Officer Jennifer Kowalski, 28 years old, blonde, like one of those Baywatch actresses Tom pretended he wasn't watching, recruited from Michigan State's criminal justice program. Tom's new partner, as of 6 months ago. The Boston PD website had a photo of them at a community policing event in Roxbury. Tom's hand was on her lower back, the same way he used to touch me when we were young, and he was proud to be seen with me. Back when I wore Gloria Vanderbilt jeans and Farrah Fawcett hair, I printed everything on the library's dot matrix printer, the one that sounded like it was eating the paper. 15 cents a page. That evening, Tom came home at 6:30, complaining about his shift, while Peter Jennings delivered the news in the background. "These new kids don't know real police work," he said, loosening his tie. The paisley one I'd bought him at Bradley's before they went bankrupt. "Everything's computers now. Nobody walks a beat anymore. Not like when I started, like Hill Street Blues." I served him pot roast from my mother's recipe, overcooked the way he liked it. Watched him eat while I picked at my salad. Weight Watchers again. I'd done Jenny Craig, Slim Fast. Susan Powder's Stop the Insanity. Nothing worked. Always trying to lose the same 15 pounds since 1987. "Working late tomorrow?" I asked. "Yeah. Overtime detail at the Fleet Center. Bruins game." I checked the schedule I'd printed. The Bruins were in Montreal tomorrow. "That's good money," I said. "We could use it. Maybe finally pay off that Montgomery Ward credit card from 1992. He grunted, reading the sports section. After 34 years together, we'd become strangers who shared a mortgage and watched Everybody Loves Raymond in silence. Tuesday, I called in sick to Pemberton for the first time in 5 years. Told them I had a stomach bug, the same excuse everyone used when they wanted to watch the O.J. verdict back in '95. Really, I was implementing a plan I'd been refining while doing all that invisible work no one noticed. While organizing Jason's expense reports, I'd memorized his dealer's phone number, written on the back of a Tower Records receipt. While scheduling his meetings, I'd noted which ones were fake, the ones during EER. On Thursday nights, he never missed. While ordering his lunch from Foodies, I'd listened to him brag about his creative accounting. While fixing the copier for the 100th time because Dorothy's so good with machines, yeah, I could unjam paper and knew to unplug it and plug it back in, I'd found the second set of books he thought he'd hidden. I drove to the station in District 4 where Tom worked in my Corolla with the Clinton Gore 96 sticker, still on the bumper that Tom hated. But first, I stopped at Maureen's house. Maureen from Accounts Receivable, who'd been at Pemberton since the bicentennial. She'd been passed over just like me. We'd bonded over microwaved, lean cuisines and episodes of Ally McBeal in the break room. "I need you to watch for something tomorrow," I told her, standing in her kitchen with the rooster wallpaper border that was so popular in '92. "Jason's going to panic about some missing files." She smiled over her Taster's Choice instant coffee, the kind of smile women share when they're done being nice, like when Lorena Bobbitt made the news and we all understood. What files would those be? The ones about the Patterson account? The real ones. Maureen had been keeping her own records, too. We all had. The secretaries, the girls, the invisible women who actually ran that place. We had our own network before networking was a buzzword. Our own filing system with cross-referenced index cards. Our own knowledge base that went back to when Wong computers were cutting edge. We'd been protecting each other and collecting evidence for years, passing notes like we were still in high school, not knowing exactly when we'd need it, but knowing we would. "It's time," she asked, putting down her chicken soup for the soul book. "It's time," like when we all knew it was time to stop perming our hair after seeing those photos from the 80s. I parked across the street at 3 p.m. when shift change happened. Watched Tom walk out with Jennifer Kowalski. Watched them get into her red Honda Civic. Not even an Accord, a Civic. At least when men had midlife crises in the 80s, they bought Corvettes. Followed them to the Marriott Long Wharf, past the big dig construction that had been going on since Bush Sr. was president. I sat in my '92 Toyota Corolla, the one with the rusted wheel wells and broken air conditioning, the baby on board sign from 1985 still stuck to the back window, even though we never had a baby. Watching my husband walk into a $300 a night hotel with a woman young enough to be our daughter. If we'd had a daughter, if we'd had the children I'd wanted, but Tom said we couldn't afford, while he spent $50 a month on those Columbia House CDs he never listened to. But I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't storm in there like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. I drove to Kinko's, the one that was open 24 hours with those purple and white signs, and made copies of everything on their self-serve machines that cost 7 cents a page. Then I drove home and did something I'd been thinking about for years. I went through Tom's files. Tom kept everything in our basement that still had wood paneling from 1973 and smelled like his father's Pall Malls. In a locked filing cabinet he bought at Caldor before they went bankrupt. He thought I didn't have a key, but I'd had a copy made at the hardware store in 1985 when he lost his original, back when you could get keys made for 89 cents. Found his pension statements, our mortgage papers from when rates were 14% in the 80s, his grandfather's will that left him a 2-family in Southie he'd been renting out for 10 years without telling me. Collecting rent while I clipped double coupons from the Sunday Globe. Found receipts for the boat, which cost 3 times what he'd told me, more than my Chrysler K-car cost new, and found something else, a bank account at Fleet Bank with $47,000 in it. Account opened in 1994, the year of the baseball strike when Tom was so depressed he couldn't even eat. Regular deposits of $500 to $1,000. Tom's name only. I knew what it was. Tom worked paid details at construction sites, but he also worked special details, the kind certain businesses paid cash for, the kind where cops looked the other way at illegal poker games in Chinatown. Nothing major, he always said, just keeping the peace. But $47,000 worth of keeping the peace? While I'd been using double coupons at Star Market and buying generic brands that came in those white packages with black letters, while I was refilling our Culligan water bottles at the machine outside store 24 to save $3. Wednesday morning, I was back at my desk at Pemberton, typing Jason's reports on the IBM clone that sounded like a jet engine, making his coffee in the Mr. Coffee machine that had been there since the hostage crisis. Scheduling his meetings around his racquetball games at the Y, but I was also doing something else. See, after 31 years, I knew every password. They were all password 123, or their birthdays, every account number, written in my stenographer's notebook, every detail about how that company really worked. I knew which executives were padding their expense accounts, remembered every receipt I'd filed, every client dinner at the Naked Eye that was really a strip club, every conference in Vegas that happened to coincide with March Madness. I knew which clients were being overcharged. I typed those invoices on the electronic typewriter, watched them add zeros like they were playing Monopoly. I knew about the SEC violations from 1997 that were buried in the filing system. I'd been the one to bury them in the box marked Tax Returns 1987, following orders I never forgot. But more than that, I remembered everything they'd said when they thought I wasn't listening. Like I was furniture, like that potted ficus that had been dying since 1991. Every affair mentioned during their private phone calls while I sat 10 feet away, before cell phones when they thought closing the door meant privacy. Every racist joke told after they'd watched In Living Color and thought they were cool. Every time they'd laughed about their wives being too stupid to check the finances, while their wives were home watching Oprah's book club and getting smarter. Every confession made over scotch at 5 p.m. when they forgot the secretary was still there, finishing their reports on the dot matrix printer. My memory was my weapon. Better than that photographic memory guy on Taxi. Women like me, we remember everything. Not because we're petty, but because we've learned that information is survival. Every slight, every humiliation, every time they called us sweetheart or honey instead of our names, like we were waitresses at a diner. It all went into the mental filing cabinet, right next to the lyrics of every Air Supply song and the names of all the new kids on the block. And I knew Jennifer Kowalski's history. Took me 3 days of careful searching at the library, using their LexisNexis account that cost $50 an hour. But I found it. She'd been transferred from her previous department in Detroit after an incident with a married superior officer. The details were sealed, but the transfer was suspicious, like when Pee Wee Herman got arrested and suddenly his show was canceled. She'd also been named in a lawsuit that was settled out of court. The plaintiff, the superior's wife. Thursday, I did something I'd never done before. I called Tom's captain, Patrick Murphy, on the rotary phone in the kitchen that still worked. Known him for 20 years. His wife and I were in the same parish, both bringing tuna casseroles to potlucks in the same Pyrex dishes our mothers gave us. Pat, it's Dot Sullivan. I need to talk to you about something sensitive, about Tom and Officer Kowalski. Silence on the other end. Then, Dot, I can't discuss personnel matters. Even if it involves conduct unbecoming. Even if it involves possible departmental violations. The kind that ends up on 60 Minutes with Morley Safer asking hard questions. Another pause. What do you know, Dot? I know they're at the Marriott Long Wharf every Tuesday and Thursday. Same nights Friends and Seinfeld are on. I know Tom's been lying about overtime details, and I know Kowalski has a history that somehow didn't show up in her background check, like Milli Vanilli's Real Voices. Come see me tomorrow. Bring whatever you have. That night, Tom came home late, claiming traffic from the Big Dig, the eternal excuse. I served him meatloaf made with Lipton onion soup mix like his mother's recipe. Minded my own business while Wheel of Fortune played. He watched the Celtics game on our 27-inch Zenith, while I pretended to do a crossword puzzle from TV Guide. What I was really doing was writing down everything I knew about Pemberton Financial's SEC violations in detail, with account numbers, like Ken Starr, with the Clinton investigation. Friday came, December 10th, 1999. The day everything changed. The day that would be bigger than when they announced who shot Mr. Burns. I arrived at work early, as always, listening to Matt and Katie on the Today Show on my Walkman. Made the coffee, prepared the conference room with fresh legal pads. But I also did something else. I'd been preparing for this all week like studying for the SATs. I walked into Jason Whitman's office while he was at his morning squash game at the Harvard Club. So pretentious. Left an envelope on his desk. Inside, copies of emails he'd sent from his company account to his cocaine dealer. See, Jason didn't know that Dorothy the dinosaur, as he'd called me to his friends while playing Doom on his computer. Dash knew how to access the email server. He thought I was still using carbon paper and whiteout. He also didn't know I'd been keeping copies of his explicit messages to 3 different women who weren't his fiancée, saved on floppy disks I kept in an old Whitman sampler box. At 10 a.m., Tom called my office on my direct line, 617-555-0123, a number I'd had since Carter was president. First time he'd called in 2 years. Dot, we need to talk. I'm at work, Tom, watching the partners arrive in their Mercedes while I took the tea. Captain Murphy called me in. What did you tell him? The truth. Something that went out of style with shoulder pads. You don't understand. This could ruin my career, my pension, everything I've worked for since the Bizzing riots. 23 years, Tom. I gave you 23 years. Longer than M.A.S.H. was on the air. I'm sorry, okay? It's just... Jennifer makes me feel young again, like when Reagan was president and we thought we'd live forever. I hung up, slammed that receiver down like Sybil Shepherd in Moonlighting. At noon, 2 men in suits arrived at Pemberton, FBI, looking like Mulder and Scully, but without the sexual tension. They wanted to speak with Jason Whitman about some irregularities in client accounts. Jason's face went white as paper, whiter than when the Challenger exploded and we all watched on that TV in the break room. He looked at me through the glass door of the conference room, and I could see him putting it together. Dorothy, reliable Dorothy, who had access to everything, who'd been there since the company still used TELEX machines. But here's where it gets beautiful. Like the ending of The Usual Suspects, I wasn't the one who called the FBI. That was Pemberton's own internal audit department, acting on an anonymous tip about Jason's creative accounting. The tip had come from a payphone in Southie, one of the last ones that still took quarters. The same payphone outside the bar where Tom's detail cops hung out drinking Narragansett. Funny how things work out. By 2 p.m., Jason was escorted out in handcuffs, like John DeLorean, but without the style. Embezzlement, they said. Also, possession of controlled substances, found in his desk drawer next to his Nintendo Game Boy. The FBI also had questions about those EMAILS. At 3 p.m., I got called into Mr. Pemberton's office. The big office with wood paneling and photos with Bush Sr., the one with the view of the Charles River where you could see the head of the Charles Regatta. Dorothy, he said, looking over his half-glasses like Ben Matlock about to solve a case. How long have you been with us? 31 years, Mr. Pemberton, since Ford was president. And in all that time, we've never promoted you past executive assistant. No, sir, not even when I trained 5 of your VPs. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Jason Whitman is gone. We need someone who knows this department inside and out. Someone trustworthy. Someone who remembers when we used adding machines. The position pays $90,000 a year. $90,000. 3 times what I'd been making. More than a Lexus cost. I'll need my own office, I said. And a new computer. Windows 98. And a parking space that doesn't require a shuttle bus. Done. I didn't smile. Not yet. Kept my poker face like Kenny Rogers taught us. That evening, I came home to find Tom packing his things into garbage bags from Stop and Shop. I'm staying with my brother in Quincy, he said, folding his members-only jackets, just until things cool down. Things? I asked, calm as Angela Lansbury solving a murder. Murphy put me on administrative leave, pending investigation into inappropriate relationships and possible corruption. Someone sent him photos, Dot, of me and Jennifer at the hotel. Actual photographs from a disposable camera developed at CVS. Also questions about my off-duty details. My bank accounts. They found the fleet passbook I hid behind my VHS collection of Magnum PIA. Exclamation mark. That's unfortunate, I said, pulling out the lasagna I'd made the night before with ragu sauce, the chunky garden style. Unfortunate? My career is over. My pension's at risk. And Jennifer, she's being investigated for her incident in Detroit. Turns out she never disclosed it properly, like Rose not mentioning her husband in The Golden Girls. Like I said, unfortunate, in a tone colder than a Bartles in Jamie's wine cooler. Tom stared at me, for the first time in years really looked at me, like the ending of The Sixth Sense, when you realize what's been true all along. You did this. I didn't do anything, Tom. You did this. You and Jennifer did this. I just made sure the right people knew about it. Like Deep Throat, but in sensible shoes. You destroyed my life. I set down my oven mitts from the Ames store that closed last year, turned to face him fully. No, Tom, you destroyed our life. I just documented it. 31 years I've been documenting things. It's what secretaries do. We're like court reporters, but nobody swears us in. He left with 2 suitcases and his Patriots jacket from when they got crushed by the Bears in '86. I ate lasagna in front of the TV, watching 2020 with Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs. Barbara was interviewing someone about their comeback from Scandal. I changed the channel to Dateline. Stone Phillips was so much better. Monday morning, I moved into Jason Whitman's old office, the one with real wood furniture, not that pressboard crap from Service Merchandise. Had a view of the Cambridge skyline, could see all the way to MIT, where those kids were probably inventing the next thing to make me obsolete. My new nameplate read, Dorothy Sullivan, Department Manager, in that brass color that meant something. The other secretaries came by to congratulate me. Women who'd been there since the Kennedy administration, all passed over like the last kid picked for dodgeball. How did you do it? Asked Maureen from accounts receivable, holding her coffee in a mug that said, World's Best Mom, from 1987. I just paid attention, I said, and kept good records, like Martha Stewart, but for revenge. But the real vindication came 3 months later, at the Pemberton annual gala at the Park Plaza, the same event where I used to check coats that smelled like Charlie perfume and Polo cologne, where I made sure the caterers had enough shrimp cocktail and those little quiches. This year, I walked in wearing a St. John suit I'd bought at Saks, not the outlet, with my first real bonus check. Had my hair done at Newbury Street, not Supercuts, where they gave you that same layered cut Jennifer Aniston made popular, Got my first manicure since my wedding. OPIs. I'm not really a waitress. Red. The room went quiet when I entered. Not because I looked like some Hollywood transformation from Pretty Woman. I was still Dot Sullivan from Charlestown who took the Orange Line. But because I walked in like I owned the place. Like Madonna in that cone bra, confident. Because I knew everyone's secrets. Because I was no longer invisible. Dorothy. Mr. Pemberton himself came over, the man who hadn't known my name for 20 years. Let me introduce you to our biggest clients. For 31 years, I'd served these men coffee from the bun machine, made their reservations at Loch Ober before it became passé. Now they were shaking my hand, asking my opinion on market trends. One of them, Morrison from State Street, actually said, "I always wondered why you weren't running things, Dorothy. You were the only one who actually knew what was happening. Like Radar O'Reilly, but with better fashion sense." Across the room, I saw Brenda Whitman, Jason's ex-fiancée. She raised her champagne glass to me and mouthed, "Thank you." Turns out I wasn't the only one he'd been lying to. She'd found out about the affairs the same day she found his PAGER messages. The best part? 3 of the younger secretaries had already asked me to mentor them. Girls who'd never used a typewriter, who thought Windows 95 was old. I'd started teaching them what I knew, not just the filing and typing on keyboards that didn't go clack, clack, but the real skills. How to read a room like those body language books from the 80s. How to document everything like Nixon's tapes, but better organized. How to make yourself indispensable while appearing invisible. How to strike when the iron is hot, hotter than George Foreman's new grill. Tom showed up at the house the next week, looking rough, like Mickey Rourke after all those bad choices. Jennifer had left him. Apparently, a 28-year-old doesn't want a disgraced cop with no pension. She'd moved on to a state trooper, someone with a future and a hat that didn't make him look like the village people. "Dot, I made a mistake," he said, standing on the porch I'd painted myself with Martha Stewart's Araucana teal, because he never got around to it. Too busy watching this old house without doing anything. Jennifer she wasn't who I thought she was. She just wanted the excitement, the badge, like those badge bunnies on COPS when that was gone. "Tom," I said, not inviting him into the living room with the new Berber carpet. "I'm seeing someone." His face crumpled like the stock market on Black Monday. "What? Who?" "Robert Chen, widower, owns 3 restaurants in Cambridge, real restaurants, not those all-you-can-eat Chinese buffets with the sneeze guards. We met at my yoga class." That was the truth. After the divorce, I'd finally joined that yoga studio in Porter Square. I'd walked past for 10 years. Too expensive when I was making secretary wages. Not the YMCA where they did jazzercise, real yoga with Sanskrit names. Robert was kind, successful, and most importantly, he saw me, really saw me. Not like I was invisible or just Tom's wife. Brought me flowers every week, not carnations from the supermarket. Real roses from a florist. Not because he'd done something wrong, like when Tom forgot our anniversary 5 years running, but because he wanted to. "Yoga?" Tom sputtered like a broken Mr. Coffee. "Since when do you do yoga? What's next, Pilates?" "Since I could afford it," I said. "Since I had time for myself instead of washing your mother's housecoats and making casseroles with Campbell's cream of mushroom soup for your poker buddies who still quoted Caddyshack. This isn't you, Dot. This whole thing, the job, the condo, this guy. You're trying to be someone you're not. Like when housewives started reading The Feminine Mystique." I looked at him, really looked at him. 57 years old, gut hanging over his belt like Al Bundy. That Irish face bloated from too many beers with the boys at the Air pub. Still wearing his Celtics jacket from 1986, the one with Larry Bird's number that I'd tried to throw out a dozen times, but he guarded like the Holy Grail. No, Tom. For 34 years, I was trying to be someone I wasn't. Someone small, like the women in those dishwashing commercials. Someone grateful for scraps, like Oliver Twist. Someone who made $30,000 a year but somehow stretched it to cover your boat payments and your mother's prescription medications and your bar tabs at the TAM you thought I didn't know about because you paid cash. I gave you a good life. You gave me a small life, smaller than a studio apartment in Alston. I gave myself a good one. I closed the door, deadbolted it like we should have done years ago. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got the house, half Tom's pension, and half that hidden bank account he thought I didn't know about. The one with the passbook hidden behind his collection of Playboys from the 80s with Kathy Ireland. Tom lost his job with Boston PD, took early retirement at a reduced pension. Last I heard, he was working security at a mall in Dedham, the Legacy place, watching teenagers shoplift from Hot Topic. Jennifer Kowalski moved back to Michigan, probably working at a KMART. Jason Whitman pled guilty to embezzlement, got 2 years probation and a hefty fine. His fiancée called off the wedding after those emails surfaced. Had to return the dress to Priscilla of Boston. He's selling insurance in Worcester now. Those GECKO commercials probably haunt him. As for me, I sold the triple-decker in Somerville for 3 times what we paid for it. Turns out I'd been right about that neighborhood gentrifying, even though Tom had called me too emotional to understand real estate. All those artists moving in should have been a clue, like when Starbucks arrives. Bought a nice condo in Cambridge, real Cambridge, near Porter Square, one of those converted Victorian buildings with original molding and a clawfoot tub, not like those fake luxury apartments with the popcorn ceilings. I can walk to work now, stop at the good coffee shop, not Dunkin' Donuts, where Tom insisted the coffee was just as good. The one that sells $4 lattes I can finally afford without checking my balance first. The women from St. Catherine's Parish, the ones who used to pity poor Dot with her philandering husband while clutching their rosaries, now ask me for advice about investing in something other than CDs at 2% interest, about divorce lawyers who don't golf with their husbands, about standing up to their own husbands who still think the remote belongs to them. I teach a financial literacy class at the Cambridge Women's Center every Thursday. Half my students are women over 50 who just realize their husbands have been hiding money for decades, like it's still the Depression. Sometimes I run into Tom around town. Last time was at the Star Market in Porter Square. He can't afford Whole Foods. He was buying Hungry Man dinners, the Salisbury steak ones on sale, and Budweiser in cans, not even bottles. His cart looked exactly like what it was, a lonely man's groceries with no vegetables. He tried to make conversation, mentioned he'd seen me in the Globe's business section, something about Pemberton's record profits under new management structure I'd designed, not in the sports section he used to hog every morning. "You look good, Dot," he said, and for once it wasn't about my weight or whether I was wearing makeup from the Clinique counter. Happy. "I am," I said, and meant it. Happier than when Friends didn't end on a cliffhanger. Behind him in line was Mrs. Morrison from the old neighborhood, one of the biggest gossips in Charlestown. Still had the same perm from 1993. She looked at my cart, fresh flowers from Trader Joe's, good wine that wasn't Reunite Lambrusco, Ingredients for the Thai recipe Robert was teaching me, with lemongrass from the fancy store. Then at Tom's SAD frozen dinners and six-pack, I saw her taking mental notes faster than a court reporter. By Sunday, everyone at St. Catherine's would know that Dot Sullivan was living her best life while Tom Sullivan was eating alone in his brother's basement, watching ESPN Classic. But the moment I treasure most happened last month, February 2000. We'd survived Y2K, and I'd gotten my second promotion. I was at lunch at Harvest with 3 women executives from other firms. We'd formed our own unofficial network, like the old boys club, but with better hygiene, sharing information the way men had been doing on golf courses since Nixon played. Through the window, I saw Jennifer Kowalski walking by in civilian clothes, Old Navy, not even GAP, pushing a stroller that looked like it came from Building 19. She looked exhausted, aged 10 years in 2, like she'd been watching Barney on repeat. Her state trooper husband was nowhere to be seen, probably with someone younger. She glanced through the window, saw me laughing with these powerful women who didn't have to ask permission to buy anything, saw the respect the waiter showed me. Real respect, not the fake kind when they want a bigger tip. Saw the Pemberton financial badge that meant I now made 3 times what her husband did. More than a bus driver. More than Tom ever made, even with his corrupt details. Our eyes met. She knew who I was. Tom must have shown her pictures from our wedding album, the one with me in that hideous dress with puffy sleeves. I raised my glass of Sancerre slightly. Not the house white that tastes like pennies. Not quite a toast, more an acknowledgement. Like when Diane left Cheers, and we all knew it was over. She hurried away, probably to Price Chopper to buy formula with coupons. I'm 55 now, in 2000. I've got 10 good years until retirement, 10 years with a real salary that doesn't require me to shop at Building 19. Real respect, not the pat on the head kind. A real office with a door that closes and a window that opens. 10 years to promote other women who've been waiting, watching, keeping good records since Carter. I've already promoted 3 secretaries to management positions. The boys' club is furious, madder than when Anita Hill testified. But Mr. Pemberton backs me because our department's efficiency is up 40%, better than any mutual fund. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, colder than a wine cooler at a BBQ. But sometimes it's not about revenge at all. Sometimes it's just about getting what you were owed all along. With interest, compound interest, calculated over 31 years of being underpaid, overlooked, and underestimated. Better returns than those junk bonds from the 80s. Tom used to say I didn't understand how the real world worked, that men had pressures women couldn't understand, like their fantasy football leagues were matters of life and death, that I should be grateful for what I had, like those women in the ring around the collar commercials who were thrilled to get stains out. But I understood perfectly, better than Alex Trebek understands the answers. I understood that every receipt I filed in those metal cabinets, every phone message I took on those pink pads, every secret I overheard while they thought I wasn't listening, while they discussed their affairs and tax dodges, it was all data. And data properly leveraged is power, more powerful than Gordon Gekko's greed. I understood that patience isn't weakness, it's a strategic advantage. Like the Russians in the Cold War, men like Tom and Jason, they're tactical. They think in days and weeks like they're sports seasons. But women like me, we're strategic. We think in years, in decades, like soap opera plot lines. We remember everything. The affairs at the Christmas party when they played Lady in Red, the lies about working late, the shortcuts through SEC regulations, the crimes they laughed about over martinis. We file it all away in our minds next to our wedding china patterns and our kids' social security numbers, waiting for the perfect moment, like when Dallas revealed it was all a dream. And sometimes, just sometimes, the secretary gets the corner office with the ficus that isn't dying. The wife gets the house and the good car. The invisible woman becomes undeniable, like Murphy Brown taking on Dan Quayle. And everybody sees it happen. Front page of the business section. That's not revenge. That's justice, with interest, compounded daily like those CDs Tom never wanted me to understand. Better than winning the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes Ed McMahon used to promise. Because I earned it. Every penny, every bit of respect, every moment of triumph. And that's the story of how Dorothy Sullivan from Charlestown took down the boys' club. With nothing but a good memory, a filing system, and the patience of a saint. Or at least the patience of someone who survived the 80s and 90s and lived to tell about it.